Elliot Moore had never been one for errors. He built bridges for a living, literal ones, out of steel and cable and concrete. Things that had to hold weight, withstand storms, and never, ever collapse. But nothing in his career had prepared him for the quiet collapse of his daughter, Luna. She was 9 years old and used to love stargazing. Before the accident, she would talk endlessly about constellations, draw galaxies in crayon, and beg to stay up late just to count how many stars she could see from their apartment balcony. Now she barely spoke at all. Since her mother died in a car crash 10 months ago, Luna had become a ghost in her own life. No tantrums, no laughter, just silence. And Elliot, her father, was doing everything he could, buying books, hiring tutors, meeting with grief counselors. None of it seemed to matter. They had recently moved back to the lakeside town of Wren Hollow, a sleepy place in Oregon where Elliot had grown up. He told himself it was for Luna, to be close to her grandparents, to give her a slower pace of life. But part of him knew the truth. He was exhausted. And maybe, just maybe, he was hoping someone here could help her in a way he couldn't. It was a Tuesday morning when the mistake happened. Elliot was running late for a project meeting. Luna sat quietly at the kitchen table, dressed and ready, clutching a peanut butter sandwich. Elliot skimmed through a stack of registration forms on the counter. Enrichment Program, Advanced Math Track, the top form read. Good. He wanted Luna challenged, not pitied. He shoved the forms into a large envelope, sealed it, and dropped it into the school district mailbox on his way to the carpool lane. He barely noticed that the mailbox beside it read, Wren Hollow Public Library Youth Programs. 3 days later, he got an email. Thank you for registering Luna Moore for our Readers and Dreamers book club, hosted at Wren Hollow Public Library. Sessions begin this Friday at 3 p.m. Elliot stared at the screen. What the hell was Readers and Dreamers? A few phone calls and one very awkward conversation with the school secretary later, he learned what had happened. The forms had ended up in the wrong place. Instead of being enrolled in the city's prestigious math track, Luna had been signed up for a community reading group at a tiny, underfunded library with a barely functioning heater and a staff of 2. He was furious. This was supposed to be part of her academic recovery plan, he barked at the secretary. She's not some charity case. I understand, Mr. Moore, the woman said gently, but Luna attended the first session today, and she didn't want to leave. What? He asked, stunned. She stayed until closing. Didn't say much, but she smiled. A lot. Said she liked the stories. Said she liked Hazel. Who the hell is Hazel? The librarian. That night, just as Elliot was composing an angry email to demand Luna be switched back to the proper program, his phone buzzed with a text. It was from Luna. Dad, can I go back to the library tomorrow? 6 words. The first unsolicited message she'd sent him in nearly 4 months. He stared at it, feeling something twist inside his chest. His hand hovered over the delete button on the draft email. Then, with a sigh, he pressed backspace. Slowly, he typed a reply. Sure, I'll take you. The Wren Hollow Public Library was the kind of place most people forgot existed. It sat quietly on the corner of Maple and 3rd, a squat brick building tucked between a shuttered ice cream parlor and a laundromat that never seemed to have more than one machine working. Its sign was chipped. The paint on the door had faded to a kind of soft sea glass green. Most residents passed by without a second glance, but inside, something unexpected waited. Elliot hadn't stepped foot inside a library in years. He held the door open for Luna, who walked in with her head low, arms wrapped around her backpack. The lobby smelled faintly of dust, lemon oil, and something warm, like old paper or maybe cinnamon. To the left, a quiet woman in her 60s peered over thick glasses from behind the front desk. She smiled at them and pointed to the children's wing without a word. Elliot followed Luna down a short hallway, passing a wall covered in crayon art. A felt board titled "How Are You Today" displayed dozens of felt emotion faces. Smiley, weepy, sleepy, scared. Some had name tags tucked underneath. Luna paused. She didn't add her name, but she looked. They reached the last room on the right. A paper sign on the door read, Readers and Dreamers, Room of Soft Things. Fridays, 3 o'clock to 5 p.m. Inside, the space looked nothing like a classroom. There were no desks, no chalkboards, no posters about multiplication tables or reading levels. Instead, there were beanbags, floor cushions, small tents, fairy lights strung across the ceiling like stars. A low table sat in the middle of the room, covered in baskets of coloring pencils, storybooks, tissue boxes, and journals with soft covers. One corner held a large stuffed bear wearing glasses and a tiny cardigan, and sitting cross-legged on a woven rug at the center of it all was a woman. Hazel Bennett didn't look like much at first glance. Her graying hair was tied in a messy braid. She wore a long cardigan that looked like it had survived a few decades of children's hugs, and she was barefoot. A group of 6 children sat around her, one resting against her shoulder, another leaned against the stuffed bear. Hazel looked up when Luna entered. She didn't smile wide or stand up or clap her hands like teachers often did. She just nodded and said softly, "Hi, Luna. There's a space by the window if you'd like to sit. We're just about to begin." Luna glanced at Elliot. He nodded, unsure. She walked slowly toward the window and settled into a beanbag shaped like a turtle shell. She didn't say a word. Elliot lingered in the doorway, arms crossed, watching. Hazel didn't read aloud at first. Instead, she passed out small pieces of paper. "I want you to write down one thing you felt this week," she said gently. "You don't have to share. You don't have to write your name. Just put a word down, even if it's messy or misspelled, even if it's just a drawing." The room went quiet. Pencils scratched paper. One child drew a thundercloud. Another wrote "angry" in all caps. One little girl wrote "tired" and circled it 3 times. Hazel collected the papers in a wooden bowl. She read them silently, nodded. "Today," she said, "we'll read a story about a girl who didn't speak for a long time, but she listened to the wind." Elliot stayed longer than he meant to. He watched as Hazel read aloud in a calm voice, letting pauses linger, watched how she didn't force interaction, how the kids leaned in anyway, how they whispered instead of shouted, how they weren't just hearing a story, they were feeling it. And then he saw Luna reach for a crayon. Just one, just for a moment. She drew a slow line across her journal. But it was movement. It was something. When the session ended, Hazel handed each child a tiny paper feather. "Your courage for the day," she said. "You earned it by being here." Elliot drove Luna home in silence. As they pulled into the driveway, she finally spoke. She said, "It's okay if I don't talk." Elliot blinked. "Who?" "Miss Hazel," Luna said quietly, holding the feather in her palm. She said, "Silence can be a kind of strength." Elliot swallowed. For the first time in months, he didn't feel like correcting her or fixing anything. He just said, "I think she might be right." The second Friday, Elliot didn't plan to stay. He had every intention of dropping Luna off at the library, thanking Hazel politely, and then spending 2 hours answering emails from his car. But as Luna stepped through the door to the room of soft things, something in him resisted walking away, so he stayed. Just for a minute, he told himself. Hazel greeted Luna the same way she had before, gently, without expectation. "Hi, Luna. We saved your spot by the window. We're listening to stories from each other today, not books." Elliot raised an eyebrow. Story time without books? What kind of program was this? Still, he lingered in the hallway, out of view but close enough to hear. Inside, the children sat in a loose circle, their beanbags forming a quiet island. Hazel was at the center again, barefoot as always, her cardigan wrapped around her like armor made of softness. A little boy was crying softly, head tucked into his knees. Hazel didn't hush him. She didn't distract him. She just placed a hand gently on the floor beside him, close but not touching. "When sadness visits," she said, "it's okay to let it stay for a while. We don't chase it away. We give it a name. Sometimes, naming it helps it feel smaller." Luna sat very still. She didn't look at Hazel or the boy or the others. But her knees were no longer pulled to her chest. Her arms were no longer folded tight. She rested her hands, palms down, on the beanbag. Elliot stared through the glass, frozen. He had paid therapists hundreds of dollars per session to help Luna speak. They used cognitive charts, behavioral graphs, exposure therapy, but no one had ever just sat quietly and named the sadness. That night, while Luna was brushing her teeth, Elliot noticed something taped to her bedroom wall. A feather, Hazel's feather, from last week. Beneath it, Luna had written one word in pencil. Still. He didn't ask what it meant. He didn't need to. By the third Friday, something had shifted. Luna no longer looked like a girl floating underwater. She wasn't smiling, not yet, but her eyes had returned. She blinked more. She looked at things instead of past them. She began putting her backpack on without needing to be asked. One night, she hummed while cleaning her colored pencils. And then, the moment Elliot had secretly been praying for, fearing would never come. Luna laughed. It was a small sound, uncertain, but real. It happened when one of the boys at the library, Timmy, knocked over a basket of markers and blamed the giant stuffed bear. Hazel gave the bear a stern look and said, "You're on thin ice, Professor Snuggles," with such mock seriousness that the kids burst into giggles. Even Luna. Elliot had been sitting just outside the door that day, pretending to scroll through a spreadsheet on his phone. When he heard that sound, his daughter's laughter, he lowered the phone and just sat in silence, stunned. He didn't cry. Not then, but later, in the grocery store parking lot, after Luna asked if they could buy those cookies Timmy likes, he sat behind the steering wheel, gripped it tight, and let the tears come. By week 5, Luna wrote her name on the "How are you today" board under the word quiet. Not invisible, not angry, just quiet. Hazel noticed it. She didn't point it out. She simply smiled and added her own name below, grateful. That same day, Hazel introduced the feelings box. It was a simple wooden container, hand-painted with stars and moons. Hazel explained, "Sometimes, we carry thoughts that are too heavy to speak out loud. You can write one and put it in here. You don't have to sign your name. You don't even have to use words." Luna didn't approach the box at first. But near the end of the session, when most of the kids were distracted drawing or building blanket forts in the corner, she slowly walked over. She took a folded piece of blue paper from her pocket, placed it inside the box, and pressed the lid closed with both hands, as though sealing something sacred. Hazel didn't open it. She simply placed her hand over the lid after Luna stepped away and whispered, "Thank you for trusting me." That night, when Elliot tucked Luna in, she looked up at him with serious eyes and asked, "Was Mom quiet when she was sad?" Elliot blinked. "Yes," he said softly. "She didn't cry much, but she held my hand a lot. That's how I knew." Luna nodded and reached out her own hand. He took it. They didn't say anything else that night. They didn't need to. It was a cloudy Thursday when Hazel brought in the small wooden box. She rolled it into the room of soft things on a little cart with squeaky wheels. The children watched curiously as she placed it carefully beside the window nook, beside the stack of journals and the basket of crayons. 9. It wasn't painted like the feelings box. This one was plain, made of light wood, but it had a soft silk ribbon tied around the lid and a small gold label that simply read, "To someone we miss." Hazel looked around the room. "This is the mailbox to the sky," she said gently. "Sometimes there are people we miss who aren't with us anymore. Maybe someone who passed away, or someone we don't see much anymore. This week, if you want to, you can write them a letter. Not for grades, not to share, just a note from your heart." Some of the children nodded. Others were still. One boy blinked fast and turned away. Hazel didn't press. "You don't have to do it today," she added. "You don't ever have to, if you don't want, but if you do, the box will be here, always." Luna sat by the window, her knees tucked up to her chest. She didn't move, but her eyes stayed on the box. All afternoon, she remained quiet. She drew a small galaxy in her journal. She listened while Hazel read from The Little Prince. She watched as 2 other children wrote notes and slipped them gently into the box. But she didn't move toward it. Not yet. It was the next day, when the library was almost empty and the other kids were coloring quietly in the reading tent, that Hazel noticed Luna standing by the box, holding a piece of paper. Pale lavender. She didn't look at Hazel. She just knelt beside the window, the paper folded twice in her hands. Hazel, knowing better than to approach too soon, kept her distance. But eventually, Luna stood and walked over. "Can you send this?" she asked, voice barely audible. Hazel knelt to her level. "Where to, sweetheart?" Luna didn't hesitate. She pointed upward. "To the sky," she said. "To Mom." Hazel placed her hand gently over Luna's. "I'll do my best." Luna gave the paper a soft pat and walked away without another word. Hazel waited until the room was empty, and then, behind her desk, she carefully unfolded the letter. Her hands trembled as she read. "Dear Mom, today I used blue paint, and it didn't feel cold. I sat near the boy named Timmy and gave him one of the cookies you used to pack in my lunch. He didn't talk, but I think he liked it. I felt something warm in my chest. Miss Hazel says feelings don't have to be big to be real. I still miss you. But today, I wasn't scared. Love, Luna." "Bye." Hazel held the paper against her chest, her breath catching. She didn't say anything. She didn't try to explain it to herself in therapist terms. She just sat and let it be what it was, something sacred. That night, Elliot picked Luna up as usual. She was quiet in the back seat, buckled in, backpack on her lap. At a red light, he noticed something sticking out of the bag, a corner of lavender paper. Curious, he reached for it. "What's this?" he asked. Luna's eyes widened. Wait, no. But he had already opened it. He didn't read it all at once, just the first few lines. "Today I used blue paint, and it didn't feel cold." His hands began to shake. He pulled over to the side of the road and sat there, gripping the letter like it might vanish. It was the first time in months that he cried where Luna could see him, and when she leaned forward, resting her hand on his arm from the back seat, he turned and took her hand gently. "I miss her too," he whispered. Luna didn't answer, but she squeezed his fingers just enough to let him know. "I know." The storm didn't come from the sky. It wore pearls and perfume, walked in high heels, and wielded disapproval like a sword. Her name was Margaret Ellison, the mother of Elliot's late wife and Luna's grandmother. She arrived unannounced at Wren Hollow Public Library on a crisp Thursday morning, gripping a manila folder and an expression that could cut glass. The front desk clerk barely had time to greet her before Margaret swept down the hallway like a gust of wind, heels echoing off the linoleum. She didn't knock. She didn't pause. She followed the sounds of soft cello music and children's laughter to the room of soft things, and then she burst in. Luna was sitting cross-legged on a beanbag, close to Hazel, who was guiding the children through their weekly gratitude ritual. A candle-shaped lamp glowed in the corner. The room smelled faintly of oranges and pencil shavings. Peaceful, gentle, until Margaret spoke. "So this is where my granddaughter has been hiding," she said loudly, arms crossed. Hazel looked up calmly. "Good morning. You must be Mrs. Ellison." "I'm Margaret," she corrected sharply. "Luna's legal next of kin after Elliot, and I'm here to see for myself what kind of place this is." Hazel stood slowly. "This is a safe space for children. You're welcome to observe quietly, but I ask that you do not interrupt." "Oh, spare me the poetry," Margaret snapped. Her voice rose with every word. "You're a glorified babysitter, no credentials, no structure, and no right to be influencing my granddaughter's emotions." Luna flinched. Hazel stepped in front of her protectively. "I'm not replacing anyone, Mrs. Ellison," Hazel said gently. "I'm just here for the kids who need someone to listen. You think listening is enough? You think you can fill the hole my daughter left?" Margaret's voice cracked now. "You're not her mother. You're not even family." The room fell silent. Timmy's eyes filled with tears. Another child hugged the stuffed bear tightly. Then, quietly but clearly, Luna stood. She walked between Hazel and her grandmother, small, trembling, but steady. "Stop yelling at her," she said. Margaret blinked. "She's the only one who listens," Luna continued. Her voice shook, but she didn't stop. "She's the only one who didn't treat me like I was broken." Hazel gasped softly. Her hand fluttered to her chest. "If I could choose a mom," Luna said, looking straight at her grandmother, "I'd choose her." The room went still. Margaret's face turned pale. Her mouth opened, but no words came out, and then the door opened, and Elliot stood there. He had arrived a few minutes late, coffee in hand, expecting a quiet afternoon. Instead, he walked into a moment that would change everything. He didn't hesitate. "Enough," he said firmly, voice low but commanding. He stepped beside Hazel and took her hand, not as a secret, not as hesitation, but as truth. "We're not hiding anymore," Elliot said. "This is our family now." The children stared in awe. A few smiled. One clapped quietly. Luna turned to Hazel and whispered something. Luna wrapped her arms around her. Luna wrapped her arms around her. And in that instant, something in Hazel's world, something long, frozen, broke open. That evening, Margaret stormed into Elliot's apartment. The manila folder now sat open on his dining table, full of legal threats and custody petitions. "She's manipulating the child," Margaret spat. "You're too grief-blind to see it." Elliot didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. He simply said, "You don't get to decide who makes Luna feel safe. She does." Margaret's hands shook. "You're going to let her be raised by someone who isn't her mother?" "I'm standing beside the girl who smiled again for the first time in a year," he said softly. "And I won't let anyone take that from her." Margaret's face twisted. "Then I'll file for custody." Elliot looked at her, calm and unflinching. "Then talk to Luna first," he said, "and ask her what she wants." Hazel sat on the bench behind the library well past closing time. The old oak tree above her whispered in the autumn wind. Its branches danced with golden leaves, but Hazel didn't see them. She sat motionless, a letter clutched tightly in her hand, edges bent from second-guessing. 2 days had passed since Margaret Ellison's stormy visit, since Luna had stood up and called her Mom in front of a circle of children and a room full of silence. And since Elliot had reached out and taken her hand, openly, vulnerably, in a way no one had done in years, Hazel hadn't been prepared for any of it. She had been doing fine, teaching quietly, healing in her own time, helping the children bloom without trying to plant herself in anyone's soil. But now she was tangled in something beautiful and dangerous. Love was no longer something she witnessed. It was something she felt, and that terrified her. She hadn't loved since Nathan, not since the rainy morning when a red light and a careless delivery truck shattered her world. Not since she buried her son and promised herself she would never be anyone's everything again. And yet, here she was, being asked to stay, to be Mom. The weight of it was too much. She couldn't let Luna be in the middle of this storm, not with lawyers and custody threats, not with judgmental grandmothers and whispers in town halls. Luna needed stillness, not Hazel's fractured past. So Hazel wrote a letter, simple, honest, and just painful enough to make her wonder if she was doing the right thing. She slipped it into an envelope, walked up the steps of Elliot's apartment in the pale dawn, and left it on the welcome mat. She didn't knock. She didn't wait. She just walked away. The letter read, "Dear Elliot, if my presence threatens Luna's peace, then I'd rather step back than risk taking another safe place away from her. She has survived so much. She deserves stability, not the chaos I carry. Please tell her I never stopped caring, and I never will. With love, Hazel." Elliot found it that morning, barefoot and half awake, coffee brewing behind him. He read the letter once, then again, slower. Each word carved something out of him. "No," he whispered. He picked up his phone, hands shaking, and dialed her number. Disconnected. He called the library. They confirmed her resignation. No forwarding address, no final shift, just a quiet goodbye. Elliot stood in the center of his living room and gripped the letter like it was a lifeline unraveling. He had lost Emily, and now Luna had lost Hazel. Upstairs, Luna hadn't left her room all morning. Maria, their longtime housekeeper, knocked gently. "Sweetheart, you need to eat something." No response. Elliot stood outside the door with the letter in his hand. He didn't knock. Just sat on the floor, back against the wall, eyes closed. "Luna," he said quietly, "I know what it feels like to lose someone who brings light into a dark place." He breathed deeply. "I lost your mom, and I didn't fight hard enough to keep Hazel from slipping away." Silence. Then a soft, broken voice from the other side of the door. "She didn't even say goodbye." Elliot pressed his palm to the floor. "I know, but I think she thought she was protecting you." I think she believed walking away was the kindest thing she could do. Luna sniffled. It wasn't. I know, he said, and I won't let it end like this. The doorknob clicked. Luna opened the door. She was in pajamas, her face blotchy, hair messy. She held out Hazel's letter with trembling hands. Let's go find her, she whispered. Elliot knelt in front of her. BC. Yes, he said. We will. For the next 3 days, they searched. Elliot called every contact he had in the district, every librarian he'd met, every mutual friend Hazel might have mentioned in passing. It was a long shot. But he knew one thing. Hazel didn't disappear to run away. She disappeared to give. And so, finally, through a teacher at Wren Hollow Elementary, they got a clue. Hazel had gone to volunteer at a local community center across town. Small, run down, mostly unnoticed. Exactly the kind of place she would quietly love. Early Saturday morning, Elliot and Luna drove through unfamiliar streets. Old buildings, worn-out murals, bodegas with fading signs. And then, tucked between a daycare and a soup kitchen, they saw it. Sunrise Center for Families in Healing. Inside, the art room was alive with paint-splattered tables, mismatched chairs, and the laughter of children. And there she was. Hazel stood at the far end of the room, helping a little boy paint a crooked yellow sun with a blue smile. Her hair was tied back. There was paint on her wrist. Uppy tea, love. She looked calm. Uppy tea. And tired. And utterly unaware that her world was about to shift again. Luna stepped forward first. Hazel turned and froze. Her eyes widened. Her hands dropped the paintbrush. Luna. The little girl walked up slowly and pulled something from her backpack. A folded piece of lavender paper. The letter. I saved it, Luna said. For someone who could read it with the same heart. Hazel took the paper in shaking hands. Tears filled her eyes. I never stopped thinking about you, she said, voice cracking. Then why'd you leave? Luna whispered. Hazel dropped to her knees. Because I was scared I didn't belong. Luna shook her head fiercely. You do. Elliot stepped forward now. No ring, no flowers, just a man who had finally learned what mattered most. I'm not here to ask for anything, he said. Not promises, not forgiveness, just come home, to us. Hazel didn't need time to think. She just needed to stop running. And so she did. Hazel came home quietly. Not with a suitcase or a grand announcement, but with a warm smile, a soft laugh, and a hand that held Luna's just a little tighter than before. She didn't move into Elliot's house, not yet. They didn't rush to redefine what they were. But something changed the day she stepped back into their lives. Everything softened. Dinner was no longer a quiet ritual of leftovers and strained conversation. Now Luna helped set the table while Elliot burned garlic bread and Hazel read aloud from a library book in the kitchen. There were burnt noodles, mismatched mugs, and laughter. So much laughter. Hazel didn't return to the library. She didn't need to. Instead, she and Elliot began to dream up something new, something just for Luna and children like her. They called it the Southside Center for Learning and Healing, a community initiative built on Hazel's classroom philosophy. Feelings first, formulas later. It wasn't a school, and it wasn't therapy. It was something in between. A sanctuary for young hearts carrying too much too soon. Hazel led the emotional literacy programs. Anna Sana. Elliot handled logistics, outreach, construction. And Luna? She became the beating heart of it all. The first time Luna led her own feelings circle, Hazel and Elliot watched from the back of the room, breath held. She sat cross-legged, a clipboard in her lap, and asked softly, "What color was your day today?" A boy raised his hand. "Gray," he said, "because my dad forgot to pick me up." Another whispered, "Blue, but the kind of blue that's also pretty." Luna smiled and nodded. "All colors are welcome." Afterward, Hazel wiped her eyes. Elliot wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "You did this," he whispered. Hazel shook her head gently. "We did." In the evenings, they fell into a rhythm. Sometimes Elliot would cook while Hazel played cello softly in the living room. Sometimes Luna would read to them both, her voice gaining strength with each page. Other times they'd do nothing at all. Just sit, windows open, sharing tea and stories and silence. Hazel never used the word mother. She didn't have to. It was written in how Luna leaned into her side during thunderstorms, in how she reached for Hazel's hand when crossing the street, in how she called, "Hazel, look," every time she made something new with her watercolor set. Elliot, for his part, found himself breathing again. He no longer checked the clock between meetings or paced outside Luna's room at night. He no longer woke up expecting to grieve. Instead, he woke up hoping. Sometimes he and Hazel would talk long after Luna went to bed, about nothing and everything. Grief, guilt, dreams, healing. One night, sitting beneath a blanket on the porch, Elliot turned to her. "I thought healing would feel like closure," he said. Hazel looked at him. "It doesn't," she said. "It feels like opening." They didn't kiss that night. They just sat there, fingertips brushing, hearts quiet and full. At school, Luna continued to blossom. She joined the Kindness Club. She started a Letters to the Sky box in her classroom. She even invited Margaret, her grandmother, to one of her school events. And Margaret came. No more legal folders, no more judgment. Just an old woman with soft eyes and a handbag full of tissues, sitting in the back row, watching her granddaughter shine. Hazel didn't expect forgiveness, but when Margaret approached her after the event and offered a simple "thank you," it was enough. Later that year, Hazel moved in. Not because she had to, but because it finally felt right. Luna helped unpack her books. Elliot cleared a shelf in the kitchen for her favorite teas. And the three of them painted a sign together to hang above the bookshelf in the living room. Here is where our story continues. There was no ceremony, no ring, no grand declarations. Just a girl who laughed again, a man who let himself feel, and a woman who stopped running. Summer arrived gently in Wren Hollow. The days stretched long and golden, and the trees swayed with slow confidence. On one such day, the front lawn of Wren Hollow Elementary was transformed into a sea of folding chairs, balloons, and camera flashes. It was fifth grade graduation, a modest affair by most standards, but to Luna Moore, it felt like standing at the edge of a mountain, and she was ready to speak. Her name had been printed first on the program. Student Reflection, Luna Moore. Hazel sat in the front row, next to Elliot, her fingers twisted nervously in her lap. She had read Luna's draft the night before, written carefully on lavender paper, edited in pencil with hearts drawn in the margins. But today was different. Today, Luna would say it aloud. Elliot gently squeezed Hazel's hand. "She's ready." Hazel nodded, but didn't trust her voice. From the back of the crowd, Margaret stood stiffly beside a tree. She hadn't said much that morning, just that she wanted to come. Hazel had helped her find a seat, and for once, no one questioned the arrangement. Then Luna stepped up to the podium. Her hair was braided back with soft yellow ribbons, and a small silver locket hung from her neck, the one Emily used to wear. Her hands trembled slightly as she unfolded her paper, but her voice, when it came, was clear. "When I first came to Wren Hollow Elementary," she began, "I didn't speak, not because I didn't want to. I just didn't know how anymore." The crowd stilled. Even the birds seemed to hush. "I had lost my mom, and with her I think I lost my words. I didn't know how to say I was sad, or scared, or anything. I thought maybe I was broken." Hazel's hand flew to her mouth. "Then one day, I met someone who didn't ask me to speak. She just sat with me. She gave me crayons and music and a soft room full of quiet. And slowly, I found pieces of myself again." Luna paused, scanned the crowd until her eyes landed on Hazel. She didn't try to fix me. She just stayed. Hazel's eyes glistened. Elliot wiped his cheek with the side of his thumb. "Today, I want to thank my dad for never giving up, even when he didn't know how to help. And I want to thank the woman who helped me become myself again." A breeze passed, lifting Luna's ribbons gently. "She's the reason I can stand here now. She's the reason I laugh again. And she's the person I want to call something I've felt in my heart for a long time." She looked directly at Hazel. "Today, I want to call her Mom." There was a collective inhale across the crowd, a few audible gasps. And then, like a wave building slowly, the applause came, rising, growing, breaking into a standing ovation. Hazel couldn't breathe. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she stood, stunned, arms crossed tight over her chest. She wasn't sure what to do until Elliot stood beside her, took her hand, and led her forward. Luna stepped down from the podium and ran into Hazel's arms. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. In that embrace was every word they had ever written on lavender paper. Margaret, standing in the back, watched silently. She didn't smile. She didn't frown. She just blinked slowly. Once, twice, and then dabbed her eyes with a tissue she hadn't realized she was holding. Later, she walked quietly over to Luna as the ceremony ended. "I was wrong," she said softly. Luna tilted her head. Margaret looked at Hazel, then at her granddaughter. "You have a good mom," Luna nodded. "I know." That evening, long after the applause had faded and the folding chairs had been stacked away, the family returned to the school one last time. The halls were quiet now, lit by the soft glow of summer sunset through dusty windows. They walked past old art projects, feeling boards, and story corners, each one carrying a memory. They reached the room of soft things, and Hazel opened the door. Nothing had changed. The beanbags still sat in a circle, the fairy lights still twinkled, and in the corner the mailbox to the sky stood quietly. Luna walked to it and slipped in one last letter. Hazel smiled. "What did it say?" Luna shrugged. "Just thank you." Dusk settled gently over Wren Hollow. The golden warmth of the day gave way to lavender skies streaked with soft peach, the kind of sky that made you stop and breathe a little slower. The school behind them had emptied. The laughter of children now echoes in the wind. But one family lingered. Hazel, Elliot, and Luna walked side by side through the grassy lawn of Wren Hollow Elementary, their shoes forgotten, bare feet brushing over the cool blades as if the earth itself had grown softer beneath them. Luna skipped ahead, twirling in her graduation dress, ribbons fluttering behind her like tiny comet trails. She turned, walking backward for a few steps, arms stretched wide. "Hurry up, slowpokes," Hazel laughed, shielding her eyes from the sun as it dipped behind the trees. Elliot chuckled beside her, his hand brushing hers, then holding it. There were no words for a while. There didn't need to be. They all laughed. They passed the mural Luna had helped paint last fall, one with bright sunflowers, stick figure people holding hands, and above them, written in childlike paint, "It's okay to feel everything." Hazel touched it gently, her fingers tracing a flower's petal. "It really is," she whispered. They turned down Maple Street, past the library where it all began. The faded green door, the soft light glowing behind the dusty windows. Luna slowed down as they passed it, giving a little wave to the window. Hazel glanced over. "Do you miss it?" Luna thought for a second, then shook her head. "I still have the best part." Hazel raised an eyebrow. "You," Luna said with a smile. "And the feather box. And the stories." Elliot glanced up at the sky. "You know, this wasn't the life I planned." Hazel leaned into his shoulder slightly. "Me neither. But it's better," he said quietly. "It's messier, louder, harder, but it's real." They turned onto their street just as the porch lights flicked on one by one like fireflies. The wind smelled faintly of honeysuckle and something baking down the road. Maybe cinnamon, maybe vanilla. Something safe. Their home came into view. The little porch Hazel had helped repaint last month. The new wind chime Luna made from shells. The potted plant Elliot kept forgetting to water and Hazel kept secretly reviving. Home. It didn't matter that it wasn't made of perfection. It was made of choice, of healing, of second chances. Hazel reached into her bag and pulled out a folded piece of lavender paper. "Your letter?" Elliot asked. "No," she said. "This one's for me." She unfolded it and read aloud, voice steady. "Dear Hazel, you don't need to be perfect to belong. You just have to stay. That's enough. Love, the girl you once were." She smiled, folded it again, and tucked it into the mailbox to the sky. Mounted now, lovingly, beside their front door. Luna raced up the porch steps, arms wide, breathless. "I'm home," she called. Hazel and Elliot followed, slowly, hands clasped. Inside, the kitchen was lit softly, the scent of soup on the stove and bread warming in the oven. Luna pulled out her watercolor set and began painting at the table, humming a melody that Hazel used to play on the cello. Elliot poured tea into mismatched mugs. Hazel turned on the old record player, and as the sun dipped below the trees and the stars blinked into view, the three of them sat together. No titles, no expectations, just presence and love and a rhythm they had written, together, one mistake, one letter, one choice at a time. Months later, as autumn returned to Wren Hollow, a small wooden sign was hung above the entrance to their new center. It read, "Where children find their voices and grown-ups learn to listen." Luna helped paint it. Hazel chose the words. Elliot built the frame. And together, they built a home not just for themselves, but for everyone still learning how to breathe again. Because sometimes the wrong turn is the road home. If this story moved you, reminded you that healing is real, or renewed your belief in second chances, we invite you to subscribe to Healing Stories. Here, we share real-life journeys of strength, love, and hope. Stories that speak straight to the soul. Thank you for being here. And always remember, no matter how far you fall, there's always a way back to the light. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below and let us know.